we have a huge announcement that we've been keeping secret for quite some time. And trust us, we've been bursting to tell you, but up until now we haven't been able to, partly because it's sort of been a secret from us too. So what am I talking about?
We have a new boat!
We do have a new boat. And actually, we've had the new boat for a while, but we still haven't seen it yet. Okay, I know you probably have a lot of questions, so sit back and grab some popcorn because we have a lot of explaining to do. If you've been following our videos, then you know that we just left Magic Carpet in the Netherlands after doing an extensive amount of work on her. That was in October 2020. We then rented a car and drove to Switzerland, where we did a 10-day quarantine at a friend's beautiful old farmhouse before starting mandatory work in Zurich for the winter months. Switzerland still has mandatory military or civil service requirements, but that's a whole other story. So anyway, we just finished some loving maintenance on our beautiful boat, and we're now faced with a few months in a landlocked country. So why on earth are we talking about a new boat? To explain, I'm going to have to go back in time just a bit. Last year, during the height of the first wave of COVID, we were locked down in France. We had made it halfway along our journey north through the continent, an expedition we had created from the south of France to the North Sea via Europe's inland rivers and canals. But during lockdown, unable to untie Magic Carpet or indeed unable to even go for a long walk outside, we made what may seem like an odd decision. We secretly bought a boat, sight unseen, halfway around the world, in a country that had its borders closed to us. Was it a case of quarantine boredom turned into partial insanity? Or was it a carefully planned decision that we had been working towards for ages? Truth be told, it was a bit of both. But let me make the case for it being a carefully planned decision. Most of you already know the story of our boat, Magic Carpet. To quickly recap, in a tragic accident several years ago, Magic Carpet fell from a crane and was smashed onto concrete below. That's when Aladino bought her and spent 4 years rebuilding her while simultaneously completing boat building school in Switzerland. Ever since launching in 2018, Magic Carpet has been our home. She has taken us down to Sicily, across to the Balearics and Barcelona, all the way through the continent of Europe and then around the Netherlands. Magic Carpet is the perfect boat for European adventures. Her small size and shallow draft mean she can squeeze into local harbors and bays, and her relatively small tankage and storage capacity is no problem when passages are never more than a few days. But after cruising in Europe for a few years, we knew that Magic Carpet is not the boat to take us around the world. She is a relatively light displacement boat, not designed to safely pack huge amounts of provisions and safety equipment across oceans. Could Magic Carpet cross oceans? Of course, people have floated across the Atlantic in a Volkswagen Beetle before. But as our primary residence, the place where all our worldly possessions would be kept, the place where we would work and live, we decided we needed a boat that was truly built for blue water. We wanted to sail across oceans, and we wanted to be relatively comfortable while doing so. So at the end of 2019, we lazily started our boat search. I say lazily because we were truly in no rush. We already had a beautiful boat, and we could continue to explore Europe before going farther afield. We didn't even announce our intentions on YouTube because we figured it could be months or even years before the right offer came up. So we waited, always keeping one eye on the boat market, holding out for the perfect opportunity. So the perfect boat for us is certainly not the perfect boat for another person. So before I explain what we actually bought, I think it's really important to say what we were actually looking for. Our biggest criteria was that we wanted a worthwhile project. We wanted a boat that needed work. This was partially dictated by our budget, and since we're very debt-averse, we weren't willing to get a loan. Therefore, our budget was under $20,000. That already dramatically reduced our choice in the blue water boat category. But we knew that good opportunities definitely do arise at that price if you're willing to do some work yourself. And we were. That's actually the second reason why we wanted a project boat.
I'm very excited to do a refit because it generally presents the option that you can customize things, you can add your own ideas and design features. You end up with a boat that you really know inside out. It's just a fresh start. And also, to be very honest, this is my passion and my hobby, so I really enjoy refit and I'm looking forward to it.
So now let's go back to this description of what we're looking for, a worthwhile project. We've defined project. Now let's look at the other word, worthwhile. So I think it's pretty obvious that a refit takes a lot of time and a lot of money, and we want to make sure that we are refitting a boat that's actually worthwhile our time and our money, that is actually going to do what we want it to do at the end. And the biggest thing we want to do is we want to be able to cross oceans in comfort and safety. That means we want a boat that's built strong, that's safe, that's a proven blue water cruiser, and that's designed specifically for offshore cruising. Now, a lot of solidly built, famous cruising boats are also really slow, but in a sense, speed can also often be a safety factor. When you're running from weather, you want to be able to outrun weather. And if you've got a really, really slow boat, that can put you in harm's way at times. So we wanted a balance here. We're definitely not looking for an ocean racer, but we also don't want to go for the slowest of the feet and only prioritize that build quality. But there certainly are boats out there that strike a good balance between being strong, having a really robust build quality, but at the same time, cruising at a speed of ideally between 7 to 8 knots at a comfortable cruising speed would be ideal. We also want something of medium size. We don't want a boat that's too big, that's going to limit us in small harbors and small bays. We loved the fact that with Magic Carpet, we could sneak into all these small little places. I mean, we could go through the canals on Magic Carpet, and with a bigger boat, a lot of these adventures are actually off limits. Our whole motto is around the world as slowly as possible, so we want to be able to explore all these little places along the way. At the same time, we don't want something too small because that's the whole reason why we're upgrading from Magic Carpet. We do want a bit more storage space and ideally room for 1 to 2 guests to join us on crossings. So we're looking in the 35 to 40 foot range with a bit of leeway on either side, but somewhere around 38 feet, if it's an intelligently designed boat, would be about right. We also want a heavy displacement boat, a boat that you can load full of provisions and safety equipment and all the stuff that cruisers always take with them, and all that extra weight doesn't adversely affect sailing performance. A lot of sportier modern boats, you start loading them up and the sailing performance gets really affected so that they lose the edge of being a sportier modern boat to begin with, and there are also safety concerns involved with that. So we want a boat that's designed to carry weight. And of course, if you know us and our current boat, Magic Carpet, then you know that we are suckers for beauty, and we want a boat that feels elegant and feels beautiful and that we can feel proud of, and we're willing to put in the extra work to make that happen. So we want something with kind of a timeless elegance. And lastly, and this is not the most important point to us, but it definitely is something to consider, is the resale value of the boat. Now, this is going to be our home, our big project. We're not as concerned about resale value because we're not doing this to flip the boat. But we do want something that has a good reputation, that holds a certain degree of market value, and that perhaps we would be able to get some return on, or at least break even when further down the road we do sell it. There's a lot of older traditional cruising boats out there that don't really hold their value and that go for dirt cheap on the market. So we're hoping to avoid that a little bit, and there certainly are options out there to do so. So those are our main criteria. I know they're very specific, but that's why we've got time. So to summarize, we wanted something below $20,000, a bare bones project boat that we could customize to our liking, a proven, comfortable, safe blue water cruiser, and we'll talk more about what we believe that means in another video. Something not too slow, ideally able to comfortably cruise at speeds between 7 to 8 knots, a moderate size between 35 to 40 feet, heavy displacement to carry all our equipment and provisions without affecting sailing performance, enough room for 1 to 2 guests, a separate cabin would be nice but not essential, and some elegance. We want a boat that we're proud of, and we're willing to put in the extra maintenance that it may require. And lastly, resale value. This is definitely not our most important criteria, but we do want a boat that holds value and has a good reputation. So you can see that we're a bit picky and hard to please, but that's why we were willing to wait. We'd know when the right boat came along. We just weren't expecting it to come along at the beginning of a pandemic. So let's rewind now to March of 2020. France imposed a very strict lockdown. I mean, you couldn't even be out on the street. And so we were on our boat in the middle of France and we couldn't really leave. And so, of course, we had to find ways to entertain ourselves. And one of those ways, especially for Aladino, was scrolling through Yacht World. Came across an interesting boat.
Yeah. So what I initially saw was a Cape George Cutter 36. And it was listed for $25,000. Now, that already was quite a surprise. They are generally 5 times higher, but it still didn't get my full attention there. It had 6 really bad photos, and I was like, well, this is not somebody motivated to sell, and I cannot see anything from these photos. There was a tarp covering the entire deck, and I couldn't see anything. So I still ignored it then, but a few weeks after that, a friend of ours, Scott, he sent me the link again. It had dropped in the price by $4,000. And that's when we thought, let's dig into it further.
I should mention here that the boat was located near Seattle, Washington. Borders between Europe and the States were closed. We were halfway around the world from this interesting boat with absolutely no way to get to it. This was not our first run-in with Cape George boats. We actually toured the Cape George yard, which is in Port Townsend, Washington, 2 years before. And we had actually been introduced to that yard by Scott, the friend who sent us this link after the price reduction. We've always been impressed by Cape George boats. They tick a lot of our boxes. They're very capable, well-proven blue water boats with a beautiful traditional elegance. So then it kind of became a question of, okay, well, what state is it actually in? Because it could be really bad. But for the price and for what we were looking for, we were still really interested. So we were like, okay, we need to dig a bit more on this boat. So we made sort of a casual post about it on Patreon. We were like, there's this boat, it's in Washington State, it seems interesting, but we don't know anything about it. Right away, one of our patrons who we've met before, actually, he's a lovely guy, Del, he messaged us, he's like, tell me where it is, I'll go have a look at it for you, I'll take a bunch of photos. So pretty much the next day, Del went over, was given full access to the boat. So when we received all these photos, Aladino and Scott spent 1 or 2 weeks just poring over them. Looking at every detail, every hairline crack, every slight discoloration, every tiny little anomaly to try and learn as much as possible about the condition of this boat.
Probably.
It was crazy what you guys did.
Probably the least of you would agree to this, but it was fun. That was really fun. Me and Scott, we sent huge emails back and forth of just zooming into pictures and going like, I think I recognize this fitting, it's from this brand and
from this era, that means they must have changed this at this time.
And just like what spare parts to calculate into this whole thing, or what was it made with, did they use good materials. Those photos really helped, not to say that they showed that the boat was in a good condition, more I would say the opposite, and that made it even more interesting for us given our very low capital and now having a few points to be able to drive the price down.
So to recap, we had found an interesting boat at an interesting price that we thought we could drive down even more based on what we had learned from these photos. And the next piece of the puzzle to solve was actually one of the most difficult, and that was, okay, well, where are we going to actually do the refit, and how on earth are we going to transport the boat and find a place to keep it, given the fact that we are currently on the other side of the world, on a different continent, in the middle of a pandemic. So we started phoning basically every boat storage place in Washington State and in British Columbia. And I mean, keeping a boat in storage in that part of the world is so expensive. And a really important thing to us was to have it under cover, because if you guys are from that area, you know how much it rains there. Mm-hmm. And for the kind of refit we wanted to do, it absolutely had to be under a roof. We expected things like taking the bulwarks apart, maybe taking the decks off, stuff like that, and so roof was mandatory.
Yeah, and I want to add that during a research like this, it's a bit of an emotional roller coaster, because on one side you see something that like, wow, hey, this is going to happen, how exciting, and then on the other side there is like, oh, but yeah, it's like that's the low again, yeah. And then it's always up and down.
At this point, we were kind of thinking, this might be a silly idea. We don't have the space. We're so far away. I don't know if this is going to work out. But we made one more phone call. And that was to Miguel's daughter. Now, if you've been following the channel for a long time, you might have heard of Miguel.
After graduating high school in Switzerland, I had no idea what I wanted to do or become, but my passion at the time was cycling, so I decided to go on a bicycle trip, from Seattle, Washington, all the way to South America. I made it to Baja California in Mexico, but instead of continuing my trip, my life changed. I became introduced to sailing. Growing up in Switzerland, I saw sailing as a leisure activity reserved for those who can afford it. Sailing is done on lakes, and living on your boat is illegal. But here, I was introduced to another side of sailing, the salty vagabond liveaboard side, filled with people who cruise the world on board boats which they proudly maintained themselves. I was fascinated, but had no idea how to enter such a world. That's where Miguel came in. Miguel was an older American man, a sailor and a boat builder. I met him in a backpacker's hotel, and we instantly got along. I think he saw a spark in me, and I looked up to him. After a while, he said that if I wanted to end the bike trip and fly back to the States with him, he would help me find my first sailboat. So I did, and that changed my life. I bought a small boat for $1,000. Miguel taught me how to sail, and I spent blissful few months cruising in the Pacific Northwest. When I had to go back to Switzerland, I was determined to continue down this path that Miguel had shown me. I decided to become a boat builder, so I enrolled in Switzerland's apprenticeship program. I think it's quite fair to say that without Miguel, I never would have started sailing, I never would have met Maya, and this whole channel wouldn't exist.
So Miguel was this extremely important figure in Aladino's entire sailing career, and very sadly he passed away and he was never able to see Magic Carpet. But his children still live in Washington, and we also knew that one of them had a big shed that used to host an RV but not anymore. So we thought this could be our last chance. So we called, and it took her all of 5 seconds to give us an answer. She was like, yes. Yes, absolutely. My dad was so passionate about what you were doing and so passionate about helping you become a sailor, and he really saw a spark in you. And in a way, this is like continuing his legacy as well. So it was just like the most amazing set of circumstances. So from then on, we had pretty much everything figured out except for two big remaining things, and that was the purchase price we were willing to pay and transportation to our friend's property.
So based on some problems that we know of that Cape Georges can have after 20 to 30 years, and also some specific things that we have seen from poring over those photos that we got from Dell, we came up with a price.
So we gave a very low offer, and we're going to talk about what that offer was, but not in this video. We have to leave a little bit of room for suspense, you guys. The owner countered our offer once, we countered again, and we settled on a price that Deanie and I were very happy with. Hi everyone.
Hello.
We have very exciting news. I'm sure you can imagine what it is.
Our fridge works again. It took me a week of repair.
That's also true. Our fridge did break.
Yeah.
And now it's working again.
Yeah.
But of course our news is not that. Our news... Do you want to say it?
We bought a boat!
We bought a boat!
Woohoo!
So then basically everything was in place. We had to sign the papers. That was a whole other thing. We were in France during the pandemic. We had to go get a notary signature.
So I made like 15 phone calls to make sure there is somebody who speaks English. Lucky enough, we found one. It had to be back in the States within the same day or the next day.
Like 2 days. We had to do overnight mail again during a pandemic.
Yeah, all those crazy rules.
It was a mad rush. It was crazy, but somehow we managed to get it done.
Another reason why we got that deal was because the boat has to be out of here. Which is very often a reason of driving a price down, or yeah,
the boat couldn't stay in the place where it currently was.
So even if it was ours now, we had the same problem of the boat cannot actually stay here.
Yeah.
So we had to organize the transport, which it all worked out though.
It all worked out. Dell was an angel, prepared it for transport, which was just amazing.
We're taking the push bed off because it would have been too high and things like that.
I mean, he made it all possible. Okay, so we are on Magic Carpet on the Sound River in France. It is almost 8 in the evening, and over in Washington State, it is the morning, and our new boat is getting transported as we speak on a big semi-truck. Our friend and patron Dell has orchestrated this whole thing on the ground for us. So I've been talking to him, I've been talking to the boat broker, I've been talking to the transport company, the travel lift guys, the place where the boat's going. I feel like a puppet master, like glued to my phone, pulling all these strings, and meanwhile the boat is on the ground, moving to where it needs to go. So it is 11:30 at night, almost midnight. I am stress cooking because the truck is stuck. It got to the driveway of the place it was being delivered to, and it got stuck in the mud, and so our friends were there trying to dig it out, but it apparently sunk up to the axles, and so now there's a tow truck coming. The tow truck hasn't arrived yet, but it's going to try to pull the truck out backwards. Meanwhile, the boat's still on the back. I feel really bad for our friends. We're all the way over here. Yeah, I'm stress chopping an onion, and now it's starting to make me cry. Alright, it's 1:20 a.m. It's 4:20 in the afternoon over in Washington. The tow truck came, like the big tow truck used for pulling semi-trailers, and got it all unstuck, but after a while it didn't come very easily. They had to try a bunch of things. So it's quite an ordeal. It's a lot more of an ordeal than I thought it would be, and definitely more than I hoped it would be. Yeah. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just sitting here trying to edit videos, but actually I'm way too exhausted because it's 1:20, and I now realize that all I've done is actually watch a bunch of video clips over and over and have not edited anything. But we're just waiting on more news. Our phone keeps buzzing every few minutes.
Yeah, just that information comes every 15 minutes, which feels like every half an hour in little chunks of video clips. Yeah, it's an adventure.
The boat is in the shed!
Yes!
It made it!
We just got another ding! And we rushed to it immediately. Amazing.
So good.
Yeah.
I really hope that we're able to hire this transport company again to move the boat out. They might be scared off after this. I think the key is when we get the boat out of there, we're gonna have to try and book the transport for a day when it hasn't rained in a while. So in the summer at some time, because I think that was the problem. The ground was mushy. Sure. It wouldn't have been a problem if the ground wasn't mushy. So
nice. We'll get some sleep soon then.
Yay!
No, but we're still not done.
No, because now they have to set it on the blocks.
Yeah, totally.
It's 2 in the morning. I'm very sleepy. The boat is in the shed now. I don't think it's on its boat stands, but it's in the shed. And the truck should be fine now.
Thanks for your help.
Sleep. Yes, I did so much by sitting here stressing. So helpful. Good night.
So now, apparently, we have a new boat waiting for us in a shed belonging to our friends.
But we haven't been able to get there.
We haven't seen it. Oh boy.
And so now, the big question is, can we get into the States?
Which looks pretty bad at the moment.
Yeah. So right now it's October. The next few months until the end of January, Aladino has to do mandatory civil service. Switzerland still has mandatory either military or civil service for all young men. So we have to get that out of the way. At the end of January, early February, we're hoping to finally get to our new boat. And let's see if we can make it. I spent days studying possibilities for getting to our new boat. COVID regulations were tightening by the hour, and direct flights from Europe to the States were banned except for US citizens. The only possibility I could see was to fly to Canada first, do a mandatory 2-week quarantine there, and then fly from Canada to the States. Land borders in North America were closed, but flights were allowed so long as passengers hadn't been in Europe for the past 14 days. So now we just had to get to Canada. There were no direct flights from Zurich, but we could go via Amsterdam. It was our best option. All right, I just booked the flights. 3 weeks to go before we get on a plane. We're flying via Amsterdam and then on to Vancouver. Very stressful booking flights because I don't know what's going to happen between now and then. I don't think there's going to be problems, but I don't know. So the Dutch authorities just announced a new rapid testing requirement. And long story short, it basically means we can't take the flight we had initially booked that goes through Amsterdam, but we can take a different flight going through Amsterdam and a different flight to Vancouver. So, change number 1, we'll see if there's more. 8 days to go before we fly, and the Canadian government has just announced a new mandatory hotel quarantine at outlandish cost to all returning Canadian citizens. So basically our hope right now is it's just not going to come into effect before we land. There's no date set. Trudeau said in a few weeks. We've got 8 days before we fly, but this is really stress inducing, and I'm really stressed, honestly. What time is it, Amore?
Around 7. I don't really know.
And where are we going?
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam airport is a lot busier, but I guess it's one of the major European hubs, so that's to be expected. Flight number 2. So we settled into a 2-week quarantine in Canada. We made it just before the hotel quarantine came into effect, which meant we could find our own quarantine arrangements. So far, things had turned out well. Nonetheless, it was not a good time to travel. We had debated a lot about what we should do. Staying home seemed like the right thing, but we don't have a home to stay in. We come from different countries and our home is a boat. We couldn't stay in Zurich. We couldn't go to Magic Carpet in the completely locked down Netherlands. We could try to rent an apartment somewhere, but then we'd still have to move. So we decided to take all the precautions and finally make it to our new home, our new boat. Air travel actually felt really safe. Everyone had to be tested, everyone had to quarantine. There was a lot of paperwork and painful COVID tests involved, but we had made it. Almost. Now the final step was to get to the States.
Just arriving, and there it is. They lit it all up for us.
It's huge. It's really big.
Our unicorn of the seas.
Oh my god.
Look at it.
Oh, there's a puddle. Oh my god.
Wow.
And the shed.
Hello, baby.
This is our future, guys.